Starting with the legs straight in a long line as low as the pelvis can be maintained. Start to flex at the hips to lengthen the back of the legs, abduct the legs, extend the hips to lower the legs, and then adduct to bring the legs back together, making a circular pattern through the leg bones. Inhale as the legs flex and you lengthen through the back of the legs, opening the legs apart, and then exhale to press the legs down into hip extension and bring the legs back together. The legs can be reversed. So we inhale to open at the bottom and flex through the hips, bringing the legs together and lowering the legs down on the exhale. Try and maintain the pelvis and spine neutral throughout the circles, keeping the legs deep into the hips, not overstretching the legs too wide. Only let the range of movement go where the pelvis and spine are neutral throughout. Keeping the legs straight and medially rotated, start by lengthening the back of the legs, flexing the hips, abducting the legs apart, and then lowering the legs, extending the hips, and adducting to bring the legs back together, making a circular movement with the legs. Inhale to lift the legs and open, exhale to press the legs down and pull the legs together, creating a stirring movement inside the hips. The legs can also reverse, so lowering down, opening the legs apart, bringing the legs back up and sending them together, adducting at the top. Only make the circle as big as the pelvis and spine can maintain its neutral position. In the reverse circle, inhale to open and lengthen the legs up, exhale to close the legs and extend the hips down. With the legs straight and adducted, ankles plantar flex, lengthen through the legs, bringing the legs into hip flexion. Start to circle the legs over to one side, lowering the legs down, and continue circling the other way, bringing the legs back up to center. Do 2 circles in one direction and then 2 in the other. As you exhale, bring the legs over to one side and lower. Inhale to continue the circle around. Making sure that the pelvis stays neutral and avoiding rotation throughout. Try and really feel the legs circling in the hips and only letting the legs fall to each side where the pelvis can maintain neutral. Keeping the legs straight, adducted, and ankles dorsiflexed, start to lengthen the legs into hip flexion, circling the legs over to one side, lowering them together into hip extension, and continuing the circle around to arrive back up at the top. As you exhale, lower the legs to one side, extending, and inhale to continue the circle around, flexing the hips back up to the start. Do 2 circles in one direction, and then 2 circles in the other direction, maintaining the adduction of the legs. Only circle the legs where the spine and pelvis maintain a neutral position, and only lower and lift as far as that can be maintained. Reach the legs forward straight and abduct the legs apart. And start to do small circles around in one direction, keeping the legs straight and abducted slightly. Exhale to circle around, inhale to bring the legs back up. Then reverse the circles, exhaling to push the legs down and inhale to come back up, These are small circles as well. Make sure to keep the pelvis in a neutral position, avoiding hyperextending the spine, and keep the legs stirring in the hips, trying having equal circles in both legs. Starting with the legs straight, adducted, and ankles dorsiflexed, start to make small circles around, allowing the legs to come apart abducted, flexing in the hips, pulling the legs back together, adducting, and extending the hips. Keep the circles very small, but not losing the neutral position of your pelvis, so avoiding hyperextending or flexing. The idea is to stir the legs deep into the hips, do a few circles one way, and a few circles the other way, maintaining that dorsiflexed position of the ankles. Starting at a 45-degree angle, we're going to be flexing, abducting, and extending through the hips, but maintaining the circle higher than 45 degrees. So there's a little inhale as the legs abduct and flexed, and exhale as the legs adduct and extend. The challenge here is to maintain the length through the spine, not allowing the pelvis to hyperflex and the tail to come off, and stirring the legs deep in the hips, challenging hip flexion. Ankles can dorsiflex or plantar flex, and legs parallel or laterally rotated. Do a few circles in one direction and then a few circles in the other direction. Starting with the legs straight out on a 45-degree angle, these leg circles are going to be on the lower side, so we're going lower than 45 degrees. Small abduction, hip flexion, adduction, and hip extension, making a circular pattern. This challenges the deep abdominals more. Inhale as you do the circles up, exhale as you rotate down. Try and go in both directions for a few circles, and challenge plantar flexion or dorsiflexion, making sure the circles are only as low as the pelvis and spine can maintain its neutral position. Starting with the legs straight and ankles pointed, we're going to create some large circles with the hips, starting in hip flexion, abduction, hip extension, and adduction. Inhale as the legs rise up and flex, exhale as the legs come together and lower. These are larger circles, so we're challenging the range of movement through the hips, as wide, as low, and as flexed as the legs can go without compromising the pelvis and spine and its neutral position. This is really about improving flexibility and range of movement through the hips. Circles can be done in both directions, and ankles can be flexed, plantar flexed, or dorsiflexed.